In the spring of 1956, a film extra named Robert Bobby Martinez gave Clint Eastwood a cup of coffee every morning for 3 months. He never asked for anything in return, just handed Clint coffee, made small talk, then went about his day. What Clint did 25 years later, when he found out Bobby was about to lose his house, became one of those stories about how small daily kindnesses can compound into something that saves a life. Bobby Martinez was 38 years old in 1956, working as a background actor in Hollywood. He'd been doing it for 12 years, standing in crowd scenes, sitting at restaurant tables in the background, walking past the camera as anonymous pedestrians in westerns, dramas, comedies, whatever needed bodies. Bobby was Mexican American, which in 1950s Hollywood meant his opportunities were limited. He'd tried for speaking roles early on, but casting directors would tell him he looked too ethnic for most parts and not ethnic enough for the stereotypical roles they did cast Latinos in. So he'd settled into extra work. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was minimal, $15 to $20 a day if you were lucky. You'd stand around for hours waiting to be called. You'd do the same scene 30 times. You were invisible furniture with a pulse, but it was steady enough work to support his wife, Elena, who cleaned houses, and their 3 kids, Maria, Carlos, and little Roberto. Bobby had dignity about it. He showed up on time, knew his marks, followed directions, treated the work seriously, even when others didn't. He figured if he was going to be in the background of movies, he'd be the best background he could be. Bobby had a routine. He'd arrive at whatever studio lot early, usually around 5:30 a.m., get his costume assignment, then head to the craft services area. He'd pour himself coffee and wait for the day's shooting to begin. Clint Eastwood was 25 years old in 1956, trying to make it as an actor. He'd had a brief contract with Universal that didn't work out, done some small television work, and was now taking whatever parts he could get, including extra work, standing in the background, making $15, 20 a day when he could get it. Clint would arrive at the studio lot early, too, around 6 a.m., but he'd skip craft services. Coffee cost money. Breakfast cost money. He'd show up on an empty stomach, get his assignment, and stand around waiting for hours before they'd call him to set. Bobby noticed. You spend enough time in the background actor community, you start recognizing the regulars. And Bobby recognized the pattern. Young actor arrives early, never at craft services, probably broke. One morning in March 1956, Bobby was pouring his coffee when Clint walked past toward the costume area. "Hey, you want some coffee?" Bobby called out. Clint stopped. "I'm okay. I'm pouring anyway. Come on." Clint hesitated, then accepted. Bobby handed him the cup. They introduced themselves, talked for a few minutes about nothing important, the weather, yesterday's shoot, how long the wait would be. The next morning, same thing. Bobby saw Clint arrive, poured 2 coffees, handed one to Clint. "You don't have to do this," Clint said. "I'm getting coffee anyway. Makes no difference if I pour 1 cup or 2. It became routine. Every morning for the next 3 months, whenever they were on the same lot, which was probably 40 or 50 times total, Bobby would pour coffee for both of them. Black coffee from the big urn at craft services in paper cups that would burn your hand if you didn't know to double cup them. Sometimes they'd talk. Bobby would tell stories about his kids. Maria was learning piano. Carlos wanted to be a baseball player. Little Roberto was just starting to talk. Clint would talk about auditions he wasn't getting, about whether he should give up and find regular work, about the difficulty of making it in an industry that seemed designed to break you. Don't quit before you find out if you're any good. Bobby would say. Most people quit too early. You've got to at least see it through. Sometimes they'd just stand there drinking coffee in comfortable silence before the day's work started, watching the sun come up over the studio lot, two guys at the bottom of the Hollywood ladder just trying to make it to tomorrow. Bobby never made it weird, never made Clint feel like charity, never asked about money or made pointed comments about Clint skipping meals. Just two guys having coffee before work. That was all. But for Clint, who was surviving on maybe one meal a day at that point, that cup of coffee and 15 minutes of normal conversation was sometimes the best part of his day. One morning in May, Clint tried to give Bobby $2 for the coffee. I've been keeping count. Bobby refused. Keep your money. Coffee's free at craft services anyway. I'm not losing anything. Still, listen, Bobby interrupted gently. I've been doing this extra work for 12 years. I know what it's like starting out. Someone helped me once. I'm just passing it forward. When you make it, and you will, you've got that look, you do the same for someone else. Clint was quiet for a moment. How do you know I'll make it? Because you show up every day on time. You pay attention. You don't complain. That's what it takes. Talent matters, but showing up matters more. By June 1956, Clint had landed a regular role on a TV show. Better pay, more stability. He stopped doing extra work, stopped seeing Bobby at craft services, but he never forgot. 3 months of coffee. Small gesture, meant everything when he was broke and hungry. 25 years passed. Clint became one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Dirty Harry, westerns, directing, success beyond what anyone could have predicted. Bobby Martinez kept doing extra work, never broke through to bigger roles, never became a name, just kept showing up, standing in backgrounds, making his modest living. He and Elena raised their three kids, got them through school, nothing fancy, but stable. By 1981, Bobby was 63 years old and still working as an extra when he could get hired. But the work was less frequent. Background casting directors wanted younger extras. Bobby's age was working against him. Money got tight. Bobby and Elena had bought a small house in Eagle Rock in 1968. They'd been paying the mortgage for 13 years. Almost had it paid off, just $8,000 left. Then, in April 1981, Bobby had a heart attack. He was on set, standing in a crowd scene, when he felt the chest pain and collapsed. Ambulance, hospital, 3 days in intensive care. The doctors said he was lucky it was moderate, not severe, but he'd need rest. No physical exertion for at least 3 months. No work. Bobby's extra work wasn't covered by SAG insurance. He'd never worked enough days in a row to qualify. He had no safety net, no disability insurance, no savings beyond a few $100s. Elena's house cleaning income was maybe $400 a month, not nearly enough to cover the mortgage payment of $800 plus utilities and food. They tried. Elena took on extra houses. Their daughter Maria, now grown with her own family, sent what she could. They ate less, turned off the heat, stopped driving anywhere that wasn't absolutely necessary. But by July 1981, Bobby and Elena were 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a foreclosure notice, yellow envelope, official stamp, the words that make your stomach drop, notice of default. They had 60 days to come up with $2,400 in back payments plus $300 in late fees and legal costs, or they'd lose the house they'd been paying on for 13 years. The house they'd raised 3 kids in, the house that represented everything they'd worked for. Bobby tried everything. borrowed from friends, applied for work he couldn't physically do yet, looked into loans. Nothing worked. They were going to lose their house. Elena suggested they reach out to family, but Bobby's pride wouldn't let him. He'd always been the one helping others. The idea of asking for help felt like admitting defeat. In August 1981, Bobby ran into an old extra he'd worked with years ago at a casting call. They got talking. Bobby mentioned the foreclosure situation, not asking for help, just explaining why he was desperate for any work available. The other extra said, "You remember Clint Eastwood? You used to give him coffee back in the 50s, right?" "Yeah, I remember." "Why?" "He's directing the new movie. They're casting extras next week. Big crowd scenes. You should try to get on it." Bobby did. He showed up to the casting call for Clint's new film, got selected for several crowd scenes. The work would pay maybe $300 total, not nearly enough to save the house, but something. On the first day of shooting, Bobby was in a crowd of about 40 extras assembled for a street scene. Clint was directing, focused on blocking the main actors, working through a complicated sequence that required precise timing. Bobby stood in the back of the crowd, trying to be invisible the way good extras learn to be. Just part of the scenery. Don't draw attention. Do your job. During a break, Clint walked through the crowd of extras to check positioning for the next take. He glanced at faces as he passed, making mental notes about who should be where. Then he passed Bobby, took 2 more steps, then stopped. Clint turned around, walked back, looked at Bobby more carefully. The face was older, the hair gray, the body thicker, but something in the eyes was familiar. Clint stared for a moment, reaching back through 25 years of memory. "Bobby? Bobby Martinez?" Bobby was surprised Clint even remembered his name, let alone recognized him after 25 years and 40 pounds. "Yeah. Hi, Mr. Eastwood." "Bobby. My God." Clint's face broke into a genuine smile. "How long has it been?" 25 years, give or take. You were doing extra work. I was doing extra work. We had coffee. You gave me coffee," Clint corrected. "Every morning for months. I couldn't afford to buy my own, and you just kept pouring." Clint pulled Bobby aside, away from the other extras. They talked. Clint asked about his life, his family, what he'd been doing. Bobby mentioned the kids were grown, that he was still doing extra work, that things were good. He didn't mention the foreclosure, didn't mention the heart attack, didn't want to burden a famous director with his problems. But Clint could tell something was off. Bobby looked older than 63, tired, stressed in a way that went beyond the normal tiredness of age. "You doing okay?" "Really?" Bobby hesitated. Then something in Clint's face, genuine concern, not pity, made him tell the truth. "Had a heart attack a few months back, couldn't work, got behind on the mortgage, banks foreclosing, got about 3 weeks to come up with $2,400 or we lose the house." Clint was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What's the total you owe on the house?" "Not just the back payments, the whole mortgage." "About 8,000. We've been paying for 13 years. Almost had it done. Give me your address and phone number." Bobby did, writing it on a piece of paper from Clint's assistant director. "Okay, finish the shoot today. We'll talk after." The shooting day ended around 6 p.m. Bobby was heading to his car when Clint's assistant found him. "Mr. Eastwood wants to see you in his trailer." Bobby went to Clint's trailer. Clint was sitting with some paperwork. "Bobby, sit down. I want to tell you something. In 1956, I was broke, doing extra work, skipping meals. You gave me coffee every morning for 3 months. Never asked for anything. Never made me feel small. Just gave me coffee and treated me like an equal. It was just coffee. It was more than coffee, it was dignity. You saw a young actor struggling and you helped without making it feel like help. That mattered. I never forgot it. Clint handed Bobby an envelope. This is a check for $10,000. Pay off your mortgage. The extra 2,000 is for anything else you need. Bobby stared at the envelope. I can't accept this. You can and you will. 25 years ago, you gave me coffee when I couldn't afford to buy my own, called it passing forward. Now I'm passing it forward to you. But I just gave you coffee. This is your house. You gave me dignity when I had nothing. That's worth more than a house. Take the check. Pay off your mortgage. Live without that burden. Bobby's hands were shaking as he held the envelope. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll use it. Say you'll stop carrying the weight of almost losing everything. Bobby did accept it. The next day, he paid off the entire mortgage. The house he and Elena had been paying on for 13 years was theirs, free and clear. But Clint didn't stop there. He kept Bobby on the film for every crowd scene, then cast him in his next 3 movies. Made sure Bobby had steady work for the next 2 years until Bobby decided to retire at 65. When Bobby retired in 1983, Clint sent a card. Thanks for the coffee. It meant more than you knew. Bobby lived in that house for another 15 years. Helena died in 1994. Bobby followed in 1998 at 80 years old in the house that almost got foreclosed, the house that Clint's check had saved. At Bobby's funeral, Clint sent flowers and a note. Bobby Martinez gave me coffee every morning when I couldn't afford my own. He did it with kindness and dignity. He never asked for recognition. He just helped because that's who he was. The world needs more people like Bobby. Bobby's son found something in his father's belongings after the funeral, a framed check stub, the check Clint had written in 1981. Bobby had framed it not because of the amount, but because of what was written in the memo line. For coffee, 1956 to 1981, finally paid in full. Here's what those 3 months in 1956 teach us. Bobby Martinez was making maybe $20 a day as an extra. Coffee was free at craft services, but the gesture of pouring a second cup and handing it to someone who was too broke to get their own, that cost nothing financially but meant everything emotionally. He did it without expectation, just saw someone struggling and helped in a small way. Clint remembered. 25 years later, when he found out Bobby was about to lose everything, he didn't just help, he solved the entire problem, paid off the mortgage, gave Bobby work, made sure his last years were secure. That's the lesson. Small daily kindnesses compound. A cup of coffee doesn't seem like much, but 3 months of coffee given with dignity to someone who's struggling, that's worth remembering for a lifetime. And when you have the resources to repay it, you don't just give back what you received. You give back in proportion to what it meant. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that no gesture is too small when it's done with kindness, and that the people who help us when we have nothing deserve to be remembered when we have everything.